When I moved into Greystone Ranch Estates, I wasn't looking for trouble, I was looking for quiet. After 15 years designing advanced security systems for high-risk government facilities, all I wanted was to trade endless deadlines and classified briefings for peaceful weekends and sunrise coffee. My wife, Casey, a trauma nurse who worked night shifts, needed that calm even more than I did. We picked the last house on the edge of the cul-de-sac, a sleek, solar-paneled rancher with privacy hedges and a detached garage I turned into my personal sanctuary. It wasn't just a place to park our cars. It was where I tinkered, built, tested. My tools were neatly arranged. My server racks hummed like a heartbeat. Everything was secure, just the way I liked it. But tranquility has an enemy. And hers was named Karen Bloomfield, president of the HOA, self-appointed guardian of order, and the self-crowned queen of this 5-street kingdom. Karen seemed harmless enough at first, hair sprayed into submission, voice always dripping with a performative politeness that felt more like surveillance than courtesy. The day after we moved in, she showed up on our doorstep in tennis whites and heels, holding a clipboard like it was a badge. "Welcome to Greystone Ranch, Mr. Taylor," she said, not even glancing at my wife beside me. "Just a heads up, we take compliance very seriously here. I've already documented that your moving truck partially blocked the mailbox for 6 minutes yesterday. First warning." No smile, no gift basket, just a veiled threat wrapped in HOA jargon. I ignored it. I'd dealt with worse personalities in government: arrogant analysts, controlling project leads. People like Karen operated on power trips and petty rules. My plan was simple: follow the major rules, avoid unnecessary contact, and stay focused on my own life. But Karen didn't like being ignored, especially not by someone like McQuire, precise and completely unshaken by her clipboard authority. First came the citations: grass half an inch too high, curtains in the garage window not being new. Then she escalated a new policy proposal at the next HOA meeting, requiring all residents to submit their garage keypad codes for emergency preparedness. I sat in the back of that meeting, arms folded, listening as Karen spun a tale about quick access in the event of fire or gas leak. Most people nodded politely or tuned out. I didn't, because I knew exactly what she was doing. When I declined to submit my code, she emailed me a formal fine the next morning. $150, I responded, with a copy of the bylaws which said nothing about mandatory code disclosures and a polite reminder of privacy rights. Her reply: "Non-compliance may indicate you have something to hide." I didn't reply, but I started upgrading my garage. Reinforced internal locks, dual-layer keypad entry, biometric scanner on the side door, hidden camera in the ceiling vent. Not because I was scared, because I was ready. Karen wasn't the type to give up. She was the type to escalate. A week later, I caught her standing near my driveway as I arrived home. She waved like we were friends. "Just checking to see if your security setup matches HOA aesthetic guidelines," she chirped. "From the street, of course." "You mean my private property?" I asked, unlocking the front gate without looking at her. She didn't respond, just smiled that frozen smile and turned away. That night, I installed one last feature: a silent alert system. If anyone entered the garage without authorized access, I'd get a ping. It didn't trigger the sirens. It didn't call the police. It just told me for a few days things were quiet. No citations, no emails, just the whir of my tools and the hum of confidence. Then one morning, I opened the garage to find something off. Nothing was missing, nothing broken, but the red wrench I kept hung exactly above my workbench. It was sitting on the table, a drawer I always locked, left ajar, and my server, my air-gapped, encrypted server, was running a diagnostic I hadn't initiated. I froze. Only one person could have accessed it, and she wore tennis whites in a delusion of authority. I checked the access logs. No breach, no alarm, nothing conventional. But then I remembered Karen had proposed a master code, the HOA's emergency override, and it hit me. She used it. She broke into my garage, my space, and tried to act like it never happened. But what she didn't know was simple. I designed the security system, and it had recorded everything. I didn't react right away. In my line of work, instinct is dangerous. You don't build secure infrastructure for black sites by flipping out every time a light flickers. You assess, confirm, and then strike, quietly, effectively. So that morning, while the garage looked mostly untouched, I moved with clinical precision. I wore gloves, checked for prints, and inspected the keypad panel for recent use. No signs of tampering, because Karen hadn't tampered. She'd used an approved method to get in. A master override, designed for emergencies, never meant for petty invasions. The same system I warned the HOA about last year, saying centralized access codes were a ticking time bomb. She used it anyway. I went to my workstation and pulled up the security logs, not the main ones, but the ones tied to the hidden protocols I embedded deep inside the firmware. Standard logs could be scrubbed. These COULDN single quotes T.TIMESTAMP 2:42 AM facial recognition match current Bloomfield. Access method. HOA master code Alpha 07. Duration 18 minutes, 12 seconds. My stomach twisted. This wasn't curiosity. This was a breach. I switched to the ceiling cam. The footage made my skin crawl. Karen entered wearing gardening gloves and carrying a small flashlight, the kind real estate agents use. She moved slowly, scanning the room like she was casing a bank. She opened drawers, took her time with the tool chest, lifted the cover on my prototype drone, snapped pictures with her phone. She stopped at my service station, paused, then pulled a USB stick from her handbag. I froze the video. She plugged it in. That wasn't just intrusion. That was digital trespass, tampering, data theft, potential sabotage. That was no longer just a Karen problem. This was legal. Still, I didn't call the sheriff. Not yet. Karen had maneuvered herself into power here through whispers and weaponized bureaucracy. She'd twist a police visit into some self-righteous story about misunderstood intentions or neighborhood security. No, I needed more than evidence. I needed exposure. I exported the footage to an encrypted drive, made backups in triplicate, and stored one off-site at my buddy Craig's auto shop downtown. Craig didn't ask questions. He just handed me a lockbox and said, "If this is about that HOA witch, I'm in." That evening I took a walk around the neighborhood. The sun dipped low behind the rooftops, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns. Most folks were out front watering plants, watching their kids play, enjoying the illusion of suburban bliss. And there she was, Karen, talking to a young couple in front of Lot 17, clipboard in hand, nodding, smiling, pointing to their flower beds. The husband nodded along, clearly uncomfortable. His wife crossed her arms. Karen turned slightly and caught sight of me. She waved. I didn't wave back. Instead, I walked past slowly, deliberately, locking eyes with her just long enough for her smile to flicker. It was subtle, but I saw it. She knew, or at least, she suspected that. Next day, a fresh notice was taped to my door. Unapproved surveillance equipment may violate HOA laws. Signed, Karen Bloomfield, HOA president. I laughed out loud. She had the gall to warn me after she broke into my property. That wasn't just bold, it was idiotic, but it told me everything I needed to know. Karen was scared. Scared enough to try intimidation. Scared enough to cover her tracks. I started assembling my case, not just the footage, but a full audit of my server showing files accessed, metadata changed, foreign USB intrusion timestamps. I even used packet reconstruction to determine what she tried to copy. What she took wasn't dangerous, just blueprints for a smart sensor system I was building for wildfire detection. But the principle mattered. She invaded my space, violated my privacy, abused her authority. And in 3 days, the monthly HOA meeting would be held in the community center. Public. On record attendance. Mandatory for all homeowners. She wouldn't see it coming. The HOA meeting that Friday felt like walking into a courtroom where no one knew a trial was about to begin. It was held in the Greystone Community Hall. Bright fluorescent lights, rows of plastic chairs, and a smell like stale coffee and printer paper. Neighbors chatted idly as they filed in, most clutching copies of the evening's agenda, none suspecting what I had planned. At the front stood Karen Bloomfield in her full regalia, pastel pink blazer, matching heels, and that same smug expression, like she'd already won whatever battle was coming. She adjusted her clipboard like it was a royal scepter and gave me a dismissive glance as I took my seat near the center aisle. Her first mistake. "Let's begin," she chirped, tapping her gavel on the table. "Thank you all for attending. I know compliance updates aren't the most exciting part of your week, but they're essential for the safety and harmony of our community." A few heads nodded. Some barely looked up from their phones. She scanned the room with a rehearsed smile, before launching into a list of minor grievances: overgrown hedges, unauthorized basketball hoops, decorative lights that were too bright. Then came the segment she clearly relished most: violators of HOA access protocols. "Unfortunately," she said, her tone darkening, "some residents have been operating outside of agreed guidelines. One homeowner, in particular, has chosen to reject established emergency code procedures. This behavior presents a clear risk to community safety." My cue. I stood, calm and deliberate. "Madam President, if I may respond." Karen's eyes narrowed. Briefly, I reached into my laptop bag and pulled out a small black remote. "Thank you." All eyes shifted toward me as I walked to the projector and connected my device. The screen behind Karen flickered, then stabilized, showing a clear Times video feed. Her voice cracked. "Mr. Taylor, what I think the community deserves to see what emergency access really looks like." The footage played. Karen entering my garage in the dead of night, gloves on, flashlight sweeping over my personal belongings. She moved with intent, no hesitation, as if she'd done this before. A murmur spread through the room. Then came the moment she plugged a USB drive into my server. People gasped. One neighbor whispered, "Is that real?" I paused the video. "This footage," I said, "was recorded by my private security system at 2:42 AM 3 nights ago. The person you just saw used the HOA's master override code without my knowledge or consent. She entered my garage, accessed my locked files, and attempted to extract proprietary data from my server. Karen's face had turned pale. She stood abruptly. This is absurd, fabricated, illegal surveillance. No, Karen, I said, voice firm but composed. This is proof. I switched slides. On screen appeared the HOA access log digitally, signed, showing her credentials used during the breach. She abused a privilege that was never authorized for personal entry. This wasn't about safety, this was about control. The room turned against her in seconds. A man from the third row stood. So she's been spying on us. What else has she accessed? Another voice added. She fined me last month for not trimming a tree. Did she break into my yard to check it? Karen looked around for support, but the facade had crumbled. The crowd she once ruled with passive-aggressive memos now saw her for what she was. I moved, someone shouted, to remove Karen Bloomfield as HOA president effective immediately. A chorus of seconded followed. Karen's jaw worked furiously, trying to find a thread of power she could still pull. But the gavel was taken from her literally. Her vice president, a quiet man named Harold with a knack for gardening and silence, stepped forward and placed his hand on the gavel. I believe we've heard enough, he said simply. Karen stormed out, her heels echoing like hammer strikes on a coffin. But I wasn't done. I turned back to the room. I'm not here to create enemies, I said. But I won't stand for abuse, especially from those who claim to protect us. If anyone else has concerns about their privacy, I'm happy to offer my services free of charge, no strings, just better security. People clapped. Some nodded in appreciation. A few even thanked me on the spot. But the most satisfying part wasn't the applause, it was the silence Karen left behind the void where her power used to be. And I had one final move to make. The HOA meeting had ended with a bang, but fallout lingers long after applause fades. For the next few days, the neighborhood buzzed like a shaken hornet's nest. People walked their dogs slower near my driveway, lingered longer at the mailbox, and neighbors I'd barely spoken to suddenly stopped by just to say, thanks. Apparently, standing up to Karen had turned me into some sort of local legend, but I wasn't celebrating yet, because Karen wasn't the type to retreat quietly. 2 nights after her removal, I found a handwritten note shoved under my garage door. No envelope, no name, greater than you think, you're smarter than everyone, but you forgot one thing, power always finds a way back in. No signature, but it reeked of Karen's perfume and paranoia. So I tightened everything, reviewed every access point, reset every code, upgraded the encryption on my drives, added facial recognition to the front gate, even installed a pressure-sensitive mat beneath the hedges near my server room window. Let her try again. I wasn't just protecting my home anymore, I was ending this. The next morning, I did what I should have done from the start. I filed a police report. Lieutenant Danvers from the county cybercrime unit met me at the station. He took one look at the footage and said, she's toast. No one plugs unauthorized drives into a private server without consequences. The investigation launched that afternoon. Karen's laptop was subpoenaed, her phone was seized, and when they found copies of my server blueprints in a hidden folder labeled neighborhood planning ideas. That was the nail in the coffin. It didn't matter that she hadn't sold or distributed the data. The fact that she accessed it at all, under false authority, was enough for criminal charges: unlawful entry, digital trespass, tampering with protected systems. A court date was set, but the neighborhood didn't wait for the judge to act. Within a week, Karen's carefully curated image collapsed. The new HOA board revoked her community privileges, cut off her access to the shared clubhouse, and poetically disabled her own master override code. She was locked out of the very system she abused. One evening, I watched from my porch as she stood outside the HOA mailbox hub, furiously punching the keypad. It blinked red. Access denied. She threw her clipboard on the ground and stormed away, her pride in tatters. That was the last time I saw her. A month later, a moving truck arrived. Karen didn't wave, didn't knock. She just disappeared, packed into a beige U-Haul and swallowed by the same quiet she once tried to rule. But for me, it wasn't just about revenge. It was about restoring peace. Greystone Ranch changed after that. The new HOA leaders instituted stricter limits on authority access. The master code program was abolished. Residents were allowed to opt out of digital registry systems, and most surprising of all, people started talking to each other again, not through formal memos or complaint slips, but real conversations. And me, I opened a side business, Taylor Security, consulting homeowners on how to protect themselves in the digital age. Turns out when someone shows you how fragile your privacy really is, you get serious about locking it down. Still, every now and then I get asked if I ever feel guilty about how things ended for Karen. I don't single quotes T because privacy isn't optional. Trust isn't a suggestion. And if someone thinks a clipboard and a title give them the right to violate your space, your property, or your life, they deserve every digital tripwire they walk into. In the end, Karen taught the neighborhood a lesson the bylaws never could. Don't mess with a man who builds the locks, especially when he knows how to break them too.